Walter Mosley has written more books than you've pretended to read. And if you only know him from the name drops on Luke Cage, you're going to learn today. There was his first published novel, 1990's Devil in a Blue Dress, later adapted into a major motion picture starring Mr. Denzel Washington. Now, more than 40 titles later, the Socrates of the Streets has continued to expand his body of work with Folding the Red into the Black. It's a 130-page monograph on developing a viable Untopia for human survival in the 21st century. Now, I didn't misspeak there. I said Untopia, not Utopia, so I can say it, but Walter Mosley, you can explain it.
Well, you know, the idea, you know, Sir Thomas More, you know, who was around under Henry VIII, I think Henry VIII had him executed, but he wrote the book Utopia, and Utopia, you know, regardless of, I mean, the content is interesting, but the idea is that in the West, people have an idea that there can be a perfect society, a society that works perfectly, all the rules, everything, all the people, you know. And the problem with a perfect society, of course, is that people are imperfect. So so you can make me a perfect society, but I can't function there. And so. And so the two major systems, the major economic systems which control us politically, are capitalism and socialism. Both of them kind of mixed together are okay, which my book is about. But the idea that once they're alone, they end up, instead of being what they pretend to be, they end up being a kind of totalitarianism, even fascism. And so I think that in order for human beings, you know, because the most important thing in our life is to be healthy and to be happy, if for us to be healthy and to be happy, we have to reject those systems as absolute systems and take the pieces of them that work right for us. And you know, a lot of people say, well, that might be obvious, but I want to develop the argument for just, you know, for everyday people, for the pedestrians, for the denizens of our society, of which I'm a member, rather than some kind of highfalutin way of thinking.
Now, you say denizens versus citizens, and there's an important distinction that you draw a few times between what the two of those things are.
Yeah, well, a citizen is actually somebody who helps make decisions about how their government, how their country, how their politics are run. You know, the truth is, in America, the people who make those decisions are the lobbyists. They dominate Washington, they dominate the Congress, they dominate everything but the courts. And I think they may have some impact on the courts. And so the idea that if they're telling our legislators what laws to make, then we lose basically our citizenship. We abrogate that, and we're a denizen. We live under the weight of that society.
So we're sitting here now at the end of a week where we've talked about activism and arts all week, and we had some back and forth over this whole concept of people who come to your show, they want to hear Freebird. They don't want to hear you talk about who the president is or what the cabinet should look like or what wars we should be fighting. Do you ever run into that in your work as you try to move people past your famous characters into other realms of thought and being?
No, I find that people are very interested in talking about how the country works, how their lives work, how they can make changes, how they can do things. I actually, you know, everyone, you know, when I'm talking, you know, every once in a while somebody says, well, I want to get back to Easy Rawlins.
Right.
And I'm happy. I said, okay, let's talk about Easy Rawlins, Ron. And somebody said, yeah, but, you know, that folding the red into the black, you know, like, how can you possibly, you know, you go back and forth with it because it's all, you know, it's all the same thing. Also, my books are so political. I mean, Easy Rawlins is a black man in America, you know, black man in America, you know, not really, black man or woman in America, I mean, it's not that you would be surprised or not be surprised about Donald Trump getting elected. It's like, well, but you know, this is business as usual because we've been living like this for 400 years.
Okay. Can I quote Walter Mosley to you?
Okay.
Okay. I have a thing here that says, you don't exist in history if you don't exist in the literature.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So I'm thinking of Easy Rawlins if we're going that route. It's a Trojan horse. You sell a detective novel, a whodunit, but it's really a sociological study of black culture through the lens of this man in America.
And not only black culture, also the cultures of everybody else. People are reading it and say, wow, in that situation, that's what I would do.
Universal in its specificity.
Right, and so that it becomes a kind of a wonderful notion that, so all good literature is political anyway, because it tells us who we are, where we might be. It always does that. If it doesn't, then it's, you know, it's a kind of a weak speculative fiction, you know.
Yeah. This book was written 5 years ago? Keep me honest.
I wrote it like 4 or 5 years ago. I kept on trying to get it published, you know, because I criticized both capitalism and socialism. The people on the left didn't want to publish.
Yeah, you said the Nation wouldn't even publish.
I'm on the board. I'm on the editorial board of the Nation. They said, no, we can't publish that, man. No. You got to let up on the socialists. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, I still love them. I love the Nation.
5 years ago, you wrote the thing. You were in the desert trying to get it published, but it's finally here, and it seems almost too timely. Like how fast did he write this and get it out that I'm reading it on my iPad right now?
Listen, I wrote it years ago. Yeah. And even when it got published, I was just thinking, well, this would be a good, you know, this is a brick in the wall, right? You know, of the many things that one might be able to think. So, oh, Mosley said on, you know, page 92, you know, blah, blah, blah. But like it says everything about Trump getting elected, about Hillary Clinton losing, about America's, you know, like kind of a crazy notion about who they are and what they are. I'm shocked that it's so timely.
So the question: do you think it would have been wasted on us 5 years ago?
Well, it would still be here today if it was published 5 years ago.
But come on, 5 years ago I'd have to blow it off. But now I'm like mailing it like it's the Bible to my friends.
It's the perfect time for this book. So like I'm not upset. I'm like, it's the perfect time for somebody to say, you know, to begin to say we could be living. The thing that's so shocking and so upsetting to me is that we could be living in a perfect world, really, except for the fact that we have to die. It's like we could be living in a perfect world, and the fact that we're not is so shocking to me. And also, you know, one of the things that I do, I'll just mention, one of the things I do in the book is I try to come up with things that seem to me obvious that people aren't talking about. For instance, robotic labor.
Yes.
If you know, if you have you know, like in a TV studio, if you have a robotic camera, that means you no longer have that camera person, right? So that means whatever profit that robotic camera makes needs to be taxed, because we've lost that revenue because we lost that person.
So you get into this concept of the mercantile versus the fascist models of being a capitalist. And there's no better illustration of that than I was reading and thinking of one, and it was on the page 3 lines later.
Oh, that's so nice. You know, I was in L.A. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went across the street to a 24-hour drugstore to buy a soda. And in front of the store, 3 young brothers with boxes selling candy bars for half the cost that the candy bars cost in the store. But they're very nervous. They're looking around. They're like saying, you want to buy, you know, like that. And I realized, wow, it's illegal for them to do this. But this is mercantile capitalism. This is what capitalism is. People are competing, and it's vicious. Competing in capitalism is vicious. But what the people who own the stores have done is they've bought the city council. They've made laws against people being able to sell things on the street. They've tried for years to keep hot dog vendors from selling in New York, and you know that's the big fast food companies, you know, and the idea is once the capitalists own the legislators and own the laws, then it's no longer capitalism because it's no longer true competition. True competition is good for the consumer, but when the capitalists own the legislators, there's no more competition. It ain't good for me.
It's bad for Eric Garner.
Yeah, exactly. Man trying to sell like cigarettes. I mean, I imagine I'm a cop. I walk up, a guy is trying to sell, you know, single cigarettes. That means he bought the pack of cigarettes, right, and already paid the taxes on them, and now he's selling them one by one, just to make some money. And like, you know, and I'm supposed to like arrest him. No.
So I'm meant right now to bring this back to arts and justice. When I say that to you, what comes out?
Arts and justice. You know, it's such an interesting thing because I can't talk about content, but art is freedom. Art is freedom. Art is the discovery of the self. Art is a world that's unknown, that I'm investigating, that I'm traveling in, that I'm succeeding in, that I'm failing in, that I'm making things. And that if any person who learns what art is and and hopefully how to be an artist, but you don't have to, they have learned individuality, you know, and communication. Communication is a social thing. Individuality is the creation. So the fact of being an artist, and so I would, my approach to it would be, the fact of being an artist is the best way to learn about freedom and about society.
Crosstalk. There's been some, your books belong in the Jewish section, they belong in African American lit. What? I know you just want to sell a book.
Yeah, I don't understand the question.
Well, I'm saying, what's the classification? Because the streets are talking, they say, we want to own him. We want to own him. This is our literature.
Some people don't want to own me. You know, it's like, especially when you're, you know, because you know my Jewish relatives, especially the ones who came from Europe, under the czar, they were under the czars and they came here. You know, they understood that black people and Jews were the same thing. They understood that you know, whatever white people is, and believe me, I don't believe in the existence of white people, but whatever white people is not them. Whenever I get interviewed, a lot of times I'll say, well, you know, they say, well, you know, you're black and you're white. And I say, I don't understand. My father's African American, my mother's Jewish. Which one of those you call him white? Yeah. You know, a lot of people get mad when I say that. They say,
well,
you know,
they don't know that you don't believe in this concept of a white race.
Well, the idea of a white race is kind of crazy, right? Like, you know, I mean, if you go to Europe before the 15th century, and you ask somebody, say, are you white? I say, I'm Scandinavian. Are you white? I'm Greek. Are you white? I'm a Spaniard. Yeah. And they say, well, you know, Spaniards and the Poles are the same. You're going to get killed doing that. Mm-hmm. You know, and it only happened here when they planned to kill the so-called red people and enslave the so-called black people. The people in the middle needed a color, too, so they called themselves white.
The numbers are changing. People are still using the word minority. Mm-hmm. What should we replace it with? If it should be replaced at all.
I think if, you know, that's a jump, like that's jumping from 1 to 27. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, somewhere around 4 or 5, if you could just say, oh, there's no such thing as white people, as black people, as, you know, like red people. There are no such thing as these things. If you could just think that, but still realize that you're stuck within that system of talking like that, that's good enough, you know. You don't have to, you know, sometimes people expect too much. They expect something utopic when untopic is good enough.